Hey guys, so today we have chapter 10, which is the age of Jackson, which is one of our more controversial presidents. I'm sure if you read chapter 10, you saw he's very interesting, but there's some controversy around Jackson. So let's get into it. So we start back with the election of 1824. In this election, there are three major candidates: Andrew Jackson, John Quincy Adams, and a guy named William Crawford. So none of the three of them get a majority of electoral votes. Therefore, it goes to the House. They are able to choose to determine between the three candidates. So the Speaker of the House at the time is the great compromiser, our apish immortal Henry Clay. And what happens is a little bit shady, and that's why they call it the corrupt bargain. So John Quincy Adams is given the presidency. He's chosen as the winner. Immediately after, Henry Clay, who is Speaker of the House, is named as his Secretary of State. So we don't know if there was actually a deal that took place. We just know it doesn't look good. It looks a little shady, just like that. That the guy who determined the outcome of the election was immediately given an important cabinet position by the winner. So it looks like they made some sort of deal to give Adams the presidency. Either way, Andrew Jackson is furious. His followers are angry, and they're going to use this frustration to win in the next election. So immediately, John Quincy Adams is in a tough spot. He's a minority president, which means he did not get a majority of the population to vote for him. So the majority of Americans did not choose him to be their president. We've had several of those since then, but he's the first. His personality, he is the son of John Adams, the second president. He's very cold, sarcastic, not a very likable type of person. As far as his beliefs, he is a nationalist. So we're still in that post-War of 1812 nationalism, market revolution period. So he does push for internal improvements, similar to what Henry Clay, his Secretary of State, would have wanted, with roads and canals. He's not liked in the South. He is a Northerner, so he's disliked in the South. One thing that is different about Adams from what we know Andrew Jackson is going to do is he does not force Native Americans out of their ancestral lands, even in places where white settlers are wanting that land. So we see a split 4 years later after the corrupt bargain in 1824. It's still the era of good feelings, technically, because there's only one party, but the party is going to split. So we have the National Republicans, which is John Quincy Adams. They're pushing for him to be reelected. The Democratic Republicans under Jackson, those will become known just as the Democrats once Jackson's elected. They're backing Andrew Jackson. So this was one party, and now it's going to split in 1828. There's a whole lot of mudslinging, which we can relate to because we're in the middle of a very contentious election, and we're used to seeing this all over the place. But they start attacking personalities. They're running smear campaigns against the opponents. It kind of gets ugly in 1828. And we really talk about with Jackson, it's kind of the beginning of our current political system. So this kind of makes sense. This is where this really starts gaining steam, this political mudslinging. So Jackson wins. They use their anger and resentment from the corrupt bargain to sweep him into office in 1828. Notable things about Jackson: he's an interesting character. He's the first president from what we would consider the West, so not from the coast or the original colonies. He's said to represent the masses. He's like the common man's president, which ironically, kind of like Thomas Jefferson, it's weird that the people that support him don't really have a whole lot in common with him, because personally, he is a very wealthy slave-owning individual, but the people that support him are usually the lower classes, the farmers, the poor. He believes in the spoil system. So another word for this is patronage. If you see that word, that's what it means. Basically, if you help get me elected, if you contribute to my campaign, I will reward you with either an office position, something to reward you for your service. The problem is this is going to end up leading to corruption, because there's people who really have no business being in public office, but because they were loyal or helped get Jackson elected, he's going to give them a reward. So that's that phrase, to the victors go the spoils. That's what he's saying is, well, we won, so I get to make these people whatever I want them to be, even if they're not qualified. One positive thing about the spoil system, if you had to say there's something positive, it does add to party loyalty, because if you're loyal to one party, and you think you're going to be rewarded for your loyalty, you're more likely to stick with that party or that candidate rather than switching back and forth. So like I said, this is the beginning of that really strong two-party system. And one factor that leads into that is that spoil system. So this cartoon you see a lot, "To the victors belong the spoils," Andrew Jackson. This is supposed to be Jackson riding on the pig here. Under the pig is plunder and bribery and fraud, and there's money bags. So this would be really mocking Andrew Jackson and his spoil system, just that it's corrupt and dirty, but he's riding on top like Yankee Doodle up there. Tariff of abominations. So this is also known as the nullification crisis. Very important topic to know. So in 1828, the tariff of abominations, as Southerners called it, was passed in Congress. And just as a reminder, a tariff is a tax on imports. So there is outrage in the South. The reason farmers don't like high tariffs, you'll see this throughout this whole year. Someone is always mad about the tariffs. If the tariffs are high, the farmers are angry because the manufacturers producing the goods are able to sell their products for more money. They're in high demand, but the farmers aren't able to do that. If the tariffs are low, it's good for the farmers, but the northern manufacturers don't like it. So someone's always angry about the tariff. This one, it just so happens to be the southern farmers, western farmers that are really mad. South Carolina takes a stand. We know they're going to be the ones eventually to secede first when the Civil War starts. No different here. They are really angry that the federal government is hurting the farmers economically. So under a guy named John C. Calhoun, who is actually vice president, there he is. He's creepy looking. He looks like this bird. They call for nullification. What that means is if a state doesn't like a law, they have a right to say it doesn't apply here, that it's null and void. That whole argument from way back with Jefferson and Hamilton, that the states are in this compact with the federal government and they only have to do things when they feel like it. If they don't like something, the state has final say in whether they do that or not. So South Carolina says, we don't like this tariff, therefore it does not apply in the state of South Carolina. So they void the tariff. They call them the nullies because they're nullifying the tariff. They even go so far as threatening to secede 30 years before they actually are going to secede to start the Civil War. Andrew Jackson, being himself, threatens to march into South Carolina and hang all of them if they don't straighten up and quit threatening to break away. So to save the day, of course, the great compromiser, Henry Clay, comes to the rescue. So he saved the day with Missouri. He made the Missouri Compromise. He's going to save the day with the nullification crisis. He says, okay, everybody chill out. How about over the next 8 years, we'll slowly reduce the tariff to make the farmers happy. They agree to it. They decide not to secede or leave. And war is avoided this time. Once again, thanks to Henry Clay. We don't have the Civil War in 1828 because he was able to talk everybody down. Oh, and this is a Henry Clay Valentine. It says, I won't compromise my love for you, but he'll compromise everything else. Trail of Tears, another really important Andrew Jackson topic. So throughout the American South, we call them the 5 civilized tribes: Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole. These were well-established native tribes in the area of like Georgia, Alabama, that area. So the Georgia legislature, under pressure from white planters who want this very fertile land, lay claim to Cherokee lands. So it ends up going through the courts. The Cherokee obviously don't just want to hand over their ancestral lands. What's interesting is the Supreme Court sides with the Cherokee. They say, you're right. This is your land. You don't have to give it up. John Marshall is still Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I told you he's immortal. He's still there. So he is the head of the Supreme Court when they make this ruling. They side with the Cherokee. Andrew Jackson, being himself, once again, his quote was, Marshall has made his ruling, now let him enforce it. Basically sticking his tongue out at the Supreme Court saying, I hear you, but I don't care because I'm the president and I'm going to do whatever I want. So that's basically the face he's making at John Marshall in the Supreme Court, which is crazy really overstepping the boundaries of the checks and balances. That's why there's 3 branches, but he just said, I don't care, I'm the president. So he forces the Cherokee to leave. Congress passes the Indian Removal Act in 1830, and the Native Americans are moved to what is now Oklahoma. Jackson's argument is he is protecting them from further issues with white settlers, that by moving them, he's preventing future clashes, which may be true. Maybe that was his true motive. We don't know. What we do know is 4,000 Cherokee end up dying on this brutal walk from Georgia to what is now Oklahoma because they're being relocated by Jackson. So Trail of Tears, part of this, I don't have a map, does come through northern Arkansas. You can see markers of where that is. So not so great thing that Jackson was in charge of there. Next major topic, it's just one thing after another. All of these are super important. So the bank, Hamilton's bank that he started at the founding of the country, had been renewed. So this is technically called the second bank of the United States, just because they renewed it. Jackson hates it. If you think about the people who support Andrew Jackson, they would not like a big, powerful central bank run by the federal government. It has elite investors. Their number one goal is just to make money. The president of the bank, his name's Nicholas Biddle, is the nickname Czar Nicholas because it's like he has so much power. It just represents everything that lower class, middle class farmers don't like. So Jackson does not like the bank. He wants to get rid of it. So Henry Clay puts a bill through Congress to try to renew the bank again, because it's up for renewal. Jackson, of course, says no. He vetoes the bill, saying, no, we're not doing this. He says it's unconstitutional by claiming this, because if you remember, there's a court case, McCullough versus Maryland, where the Supreme Court has already said the bank is constitutional. But here's Jackson again saying, I don't care what that other branch of government says. I am the president. I say it's not constitutional and I'm going to kill it. He makes it his personal mission to kill the bank, get rid of the bank. And it becomes a major issue in the upcoming election where Henry Clay is going to run for president against Jackson. So 32, Henry Clay versus Jackson. Poor Henry Clay, he's going to run for president over and over and over and never wins. It's very sad, but not for lack of trying. He keeps coming back. This election, we see the first third party that really has any traction. It's called the Anti-Masonic Party. We also see the first nominating conventions, which is where, we've had these fairly recently. The party comes together to choose who they're going to put as their candidate. Jackson ends up winning again. The National Bank is due to expire because remember, he vetoed the plan to renew it. So instead of letting it expire, he has a plan to dry up the bank. So he takes all the money out of the National Bank and puts it into what he calls his pet banks, which are like small little state banks. Because if you want to get rid of a bank, you just get rid of the money, because without the money, it's just a building. It's not a bank. So that's how he felt. He killed the Bank of the United States, not realizing the effects of this are not going to be very good. So the effects, we have these wildcat banks, which are like these sketchy banks out on the frontier who start issuing all this money, which if you remember, this is the reason we had a panic in 1819, very similar situation. So Jackson issues something called the Specie Circular. All this is it says you can't take out a loan to buy land. You have to pay for it with hard cash. So you have to actually have the money to afford it to buy it. It stops this speculation where these banks are giving out loans to people who can't afford to pay it. Problem is, it's too late. By killing the bank, it leads to another financial panic. So he said about every 20 to 30 years, we get another one of these. Here's the next one. 1837, we have a bank. This one is kind of Jackson's fault because he killed the bank. This cartoon is called King Andrew the First, a very popular one. Obviously anti-Jackson cartoon. They're portraying him as a king, that he has the veto in his hand. He's stepping on the Constitution, that he thinks he can do whatever he wants because he's president. And he uses that veto quite liberally as often as he wants. So if you see that cartoon, that's what it's trying to say. So in opposition to Jackson, we have a new political party. So really the second party system develops because of Andrew Jackson. We have Jackson's party and the I Hate Andrew Jackson party. That's how you can remember the Whigs, or picture this lovely wig right here. They are anti-King Andrew. So this is like a really random group of people who the only thing they have in common is that they all hate Andrew Jackson. So Southern states writers, like the people he threatened to hang in South Carolina during the nullification crisis, they don't like him. Henry Clay sure doesn't like him, and neither do his supporters. Northern industrialists, they don't like him. His main support is coming from farmers. Evangelicals, who are part of this anti-Masonic party, it doesn't seem like they'd have anything in common with these people, but they join the Whigs just because they also hate Andrew Jackson. As far as their platform, they're really just pushing, just think of Henry Clay as like the face of the Whigs. They want internal improvements, industry, transportation, this market economy. That's really what they're pushing for. And they will elect a couple of presidents. Both of them will be war heroes, but the Whigs are a decent political force while they exist. So following Jackson, we have Martin Van Buren. He's like his hand-picked successor. So Andrew Jackson forces them to nominate Martin Van Buren. The Whigs choose several different potential candidates, but the one who comes out on top is William Henry Harrison, the hero of Tippecanoe from the War of 1812. Van Buren wins. He inherits a bad situation, though. Right before he left office, Jackson killed the bank. Because of the bank, it leads to a panic, and it just makes Martin Van Buren look really bad. Even though it wasn't his fault, he kind of has to live with the consequences of Jackson's actions. So there's bank failures, factories close, people are unemployed. Poor Martin Van Buren is just the one that has to deal with all of that. And this is a really funny commercial where they make this little girl into Martin Van Buren, if you haven't seen that. And here's a cat that looks a whole lot like Martin Van Buren. I just thought that was kind of crazy. It's the facial hair. All right, last but not least, so Jackson shifts the political landscape forever in America. So some changes that happen in this period. Politics really becomes for the people, just meaning that Jackson represented the common man, that they felt like he was their president and that they were working from the grassroots to support this candidate. We see a real two-party system. So the first party system is the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. The Federalists go away, they die out. The Democratic Party, Democratic Republicans split, and eventually the Whigs become the second party. So we have Jackson's Democrats versus the Whigs, that is the second party system. So the Whigs, this is what they want: federal power, internal improvements, the national bank, moral issues, whereas Jacksonian Democrats are more for states' rights, keeping the federal government in check. And Jackson is going to be just the face of that party. Here's a really old, wrinkled Andrew Jackson, but very, very important political figure, even though he's extremely controversial. And we'll do a little more with him later this week when we do an activity about, is he a hero or is he a villain or is he a little bit of both? We don't know. All right, well, that's it for chapter 10. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I hope everybody has a great day.